is companies like this one to switch to traditional ingredients like beef tallow. Steak and Shake just switched out. We're very grateful for them for RFKing the French fries. They turned me into a verb. This generation of our kids is the first generation in 200 years that is going to have a shorter lifespan than their parents. It's a moral issue. It's a financial issue. The healthcare costs are going to sink us. And the only way that we're going to solve it is by changing what we eat.
60 to 80% of everything in the average grocery store contains seed oils. The average person is getting 30% of their calories from seed oils. One French fry has as much toxicity as smoking one cigarette. When I say toxicity, I'm referring to a category of toxins called alpha-beta unsaturated aldehydes. Those are very toxic. They damage our biomolecules. They will damage our cell membranes. They will damage our mitochondria. They will damage our enzymes. They can damage our brain cells, any kind of cell in our body. Alpha-beta unsaturated aldehydes are the same exact family of toxins as you get from smoking cigarettes. If you eat a serving of fries, it's as if you smoked an entire pack of tobacco cigarettes. I think we can solve a lot of what's wrong with medicine by looking at chemistry, biochemistry, and how does the chemistry of our food affect the function of our cells. I think we have so many more answers than medical science is telling us. I want to get to the root of what is making people sick. I want every cell in your body to be healthy. And if you care about people's cells, you start to think about what is happening at the level of the cell. And that is where all of these medical mysteries can be answered. It's not that complicated. We have all the research that we need to solve so many of these huge, expensive epidemics. What we really need is better medical advice. But now we've got so many very popular movements where people have embraced saturated fat and animal products. What it takes to be able to do something like that in today's culture is to be the person who is willing to rebel against the oppressive, unhealthy culture that is trying to make you sick.
People are surprised when they say, what is the number one thing I should look for and give up in my diet for myself and my family? I'm like, it's the rancid seed oils. Learn how to go through a grocery store and avoid them in everything, because even in health food stores, you're still finding these rancid seed oils. They just gunk up our membranes, and when that membrane is gunked up by these bad fats, we don't feel good. Matter of fact, we become weight loss resistant. If you look at the studies, these bad fats, these rancid seed oils are causing people not to be able to lose weight. So the fact is we are causing hormone problems, which is leading to obesity, which is leading to diabetes, which is leading to all these diseases, even autoimmune, where people just don't know that these fats that them and their family, even oftentimes when they're trying to eat healthier, are being exposed to unknowing unless you become privy to them. And then it's easy to avoid them. It's an easy change. I say everyone can do this Monday. Just get these rancid seed oils out of your family's diet and watch what happens to your energy. Just simple as that. Watch what happens to your brain fog. Watch what happens to your anxiety. I promise you, you will see a change in your child's behavior, and let alone how well you think, just by getting rid of these rancid seed oils.
But then came a bright moment of discovery. A quarter century ago, and at long last, weeds had met their match in great science, energetic people, and an uncompromising commitment to the future of the world. That's the simple beauty of Roundup. A remarkable story, well worth celebrating.
Look, so many of these toxins are coming into us via food from a chemical standpoint. We're spraying food with so many different chemicals, so many different pesticides, herbicides. What about the chemical glyphosate? We are all being affected by this chemical. Okay, what does it do? Well, one of the things it does, and it's been proven to do, is open up your gut barrier. And what does that mean? That means that undigested proteins are crossing from your gut into your bloodstream, and it's causing food allergies. It's causing hyperimmunity, autoimmune, I mean, all these things. And of course, there's links to the chemical in cancer. If people Google Nancy Swanson and glyphosate, you'll see graphs of different conditions from Crohn's, IBS, I mean, you name the condition, and you'll see this escalation with the chemical glyphosate that they started spraying in the late 90s. In these graphs, you see these conditions just rising like this. Why? Because it's not only toxic in itself, this chemical glyphosate, but it's making these other chemicals that we already have in us and exposed to even more toxic by allowing them to cross the gut barrier and the blood-brain barrier. So all of these problems we're dealing with just in our food supply.
This rich farming region produces immense quantities of food. Handling and processing foodstuffs is one of the leading industries of our Middle Western cities. When corn was discovered growing wild in the Western Hemisphere, it was not much taller than field grass. The full-grown corn stands higher than a man. Men have cultivated and improved it for hundreds of years, and today corn is one of America's most abundant and valuable crops.
If we dial back 100 years ago, we were starting to destroy the topsoil of the planet, in the United States in particular. And what we were doing is we were failing to do crop rotation, we were failing to respect the soil's need for feeding and composting and these age-old farming practices. And so our plants started to fail. And so our crops started to be prone to insects and fungi and viruses. And that led to the Dust Bowl. In this time of plenty that we have today, where we have the breadbasket of the world growing in our Midwest, it's very hard to imagine that that very same ground was dead and completely non-productive and led to this huge famine event in our own country. And so that, I think, is kind of the march of how we got to this convenience-based, chemical-based food chain that would really set the stage for the GMO era.
You know what's growing down on the farm? GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. Among the GMOs available in the U.S. right now, corn, soybeans, canola, sugar beets, cotton, alfalfa, potatoes, summer squash, apples, papaya, and pink pineapple.
So it's important to understand what glyphosate is and what Monsanto was up to. So Monsanto goes all the way back to Agent Orange in Vietnam, okay? Another defoliant. Could spray it on the trees in the jungle, cause the foliage in the jungle to shrink, so that way in guerrilla warfare we're not as much of a disadvantage. The soldiers, it's known through Agent Orange, have gotten very, very, very sick. Well, the same company who participated in making that thing says, hey, we have another defoliant herbicide. It's herbicide called Roundup commercially, but glyphosate, the chemical, will cause foliage to shrink or to die.
Weeds, no problem. Kill weeds and grasses, roots and all, with a shot of Roundup. For driveways, patios, fences. Make weeding easy. With Roundup, nothing kills weeds better.
GMOs, genetically modified foods or crops. What would happen is Monsanto would patent a seed of, let's say, corn, and this corn would be resistant to an herbicide called glyphosate. So now if you're a farmer and you want to grow a bunch of corn, but you worry about weeds and herbs that come in that could have an adverse effect on your crop, well, now you can grow corn that's resistant to this toxin, this herbicide called glyphosate. You can spray the heck out of the fields, the corn won't die, and the herbs around it will.
So they developed Roundup Ready corn. And that corn, you can pour glyphosate all over it and it will do nothing to it. And you hire one airplane and they fly over the fields, they saturate the entire landscape with glyphosate. Everything dies except the Roundup Ready corn. And within a couple of years, 90% of the corn, 95% of the corn in the United States is now Roundup Ready corn. And then they developed it for soybean and for barley, for sorghum, for a lot of other plants. And then around 2006, they discovered that if you sprayed it on wheat late in the season, it would desiccate the wheat. In other words, it would dry it out. So all the wheat in our country started being sprayed that year in 2006 with glyphosate. And that's the year you saw this explosion of celiac diseases and gluten allergies and all of this stuff, and then severe damage to the microbiome. Because it's designed to kill plants, and there are structures in your gut biome that are critical structures in your gut biome which have plant-like metabolisms which are destroyed by glyphosate.
But the reality is your gut microbiome is not made from human cells. And the impact on that is the same impact it's having on the microbiome of the soil and everywhere else that it touches, and it's absolutely devastating there. You also have to understand that this is a water-soluble chemical. It's very toxic, goes into the soil, and it's gone into our water systems. And then you start to see, like the Mississippi, for example, are all drains there, and you start to see cancer statistics along the Mississippi, and you see they're startling. Very, very likely anybody in the United States who had a urine test today, they're probably going to find some glyphosate in it. It's almost impossible to avoid. That's how bad it is.
The reality is we have introduced into human existence now something that is ubiquitous with our day-to-day lives. An incredible statistic is only 0.1%, 1,000% of the glyphosate or Roundup that's sprayed worldwide actually hits its target. 99.99% of this chemical never reaches its therapeutic target of the weed. Every 6 years since the 1980s, we have sold twice as much glyphosate worldwide. Last year, 2 billion kilograms of glyphosate were used worldwide. 2 billion kilograms of a single chemical that would rob our soil of its nutrient and medicinal qualities. 2 billion kilograms of a water-soluble toxin. And once you dump this into the environment, it's going to go into the water table. It actually evaporates and goes into our air, ends up in our clouds, rains back on us. So we create this whole ecosystem of toxin. What does that mean for human health? What does that mean for multicellular health? What does that mean for microcellular health on the planet?
When you're talking about pesticides, it's about how, the U.S. innovation has led to this abundance of food that's feeding the whole world, and we need to protect that type of innovation. We're on the verge of civilizational collapse, I think, based on our broken food system and the fact that we're getting so sick and the fact that the healthcare system profits from more and more sick Americans. Medical research is still a very trusted institution in society, and they can buy off that medical research. Once you have a scientific consensus that glyphosate is fine, once that has the stamp of Harvard Med School and the stamp of the NIH, then you have activated all these other gatekeepers in society to call anyone a war criminal for questioning that. So what these industries have done on both the food side and the pharmaceutical side, and what I saw and helped do working for these industries, is you have to get to owning the science. But the science is for sale.
I'm Carrie Gillum. I've been a journalist for more than 30 years. I spent most of my early career with Reuters, International Newswire. At Reuters, one of my main jobs was to cover the agrochemical industry, and that included Monsanto. And over time, Monsanto became very unhappy with my reporting and spent a lot of time pressuring and harassing and trying to intimidate me and trying to control my work. What I learned through covering the company for more than 25 years was that it was part of a playbook to try to suppress any information from scientists, from researchers, from activists that would be detrimental to their profits and to their corporate agenda. To hear Monsanto tell it, this was the safest chemical that you could use in agriculture. It was so safe for people and pets, and you could spray it directly over your GMO crops, and it wouldn't be harmful to the soil, wouldn't be harmful to water or biodiversity. And that just wasn't the case. And researchers started paying attention. So they really started looking into it, and we're finding that it does, hurt the soil, it does bind in the soil, it does impact the environment, it certainly does increase weed resistance. It does linger and create residues in the food that we are feeding our kids. The goal really always was with Monsanto to confuse or hide or mislead the public.
Monsanto had essentially knew about the fact that its herbicide was causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or causing cancer in people, and they buried it. A legal team led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had taken this to court. He got the first case to court, and in the very first case, a groundskeeper named Dwayne Lee Johnson was the plaintiff, and the jury ended up awarding him $289 million.
This morning, fallout from a monumental verdict.
This case was historic.
Friday, a jury in San Francisco found biochemical giant Monsanto liable for former school groundskeeper Dwayne Johnson's cancer. Johnson says constant use of the household product Roundup led to his diagnosis of terminal non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Doctors have given him just months to live, the jury awarding $289 million in damages.
When we sued Monsanto, we had enough rat studies, enough human studies. We had about 10 of each. And we were able to go to the judge and say, we got enough science on this now to show that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is being caused by glyphosate. So those were the only cases we brought. But there are a lot of, really interesting studies that show links between injuries to children and the amount of glyphosate in a woman's urine and the mother's urine.
It almost gets to be darkly ironic. Bayer, a pharmaceutical company, who has treatments that they sell to treat things like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, buys Monsanto, who creates a product that causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. One of the interesting things that people probably aren't aware of, and one of the things that I hear constantly, and I have personal experience with, is that there are people who are quote-unquote gluten intolerant. They can't eat any gluten-based products. They can't eat things with wheat in them. They can go to Europe, they can go to Italy, eat the pasta there, no problem. They don't feel it at all. Why would that be? It's because the soil that it's grown in and the way that the crops are treated in that process is different.
So what's going on right now in the food supply is that genetically modified ingredients are mostly not still labeled. They're not disclosing what's going on in the food supply. And we are consuming very high levels of glyphosate herbicides in our foods. Most conventional foods, especially grains, peas, beans, legumes, will have glyphosate because it's allowed. And this is what is making America sick.
We have in the U.S. what are called MRLs, maximum residue levels. And these are levels that the EPA sets as legal limits. So if you have this much glyphosate in an apple, for instance, and it's underneath your MRL, you're fine, it's legal. How do they set these MRLs? Well, what I came to find out is they set them pretty much whatever the company selling the chemical tells them they should be set at. The company does the research to find out, how much is going to be left on the food, and then they work with the EPA and they set these levels. And if you look at a database of MRLs around the world, you find that the U.S. consistently has the highest legal limits in our foods because the companies say they're safe.
Very low levels of glyphosate have shown to contribute to endocrine disruption, to cancer, to all kinds of harm. So really, according to the science, there's no safe level of glyphosate in our food supply. 0.1 parts per billion is what should be avoided, according to scientists. That would be the maximum residue level for all the crops. That's not the case. Peppermint has a maximum residue level of 200 parts per million. That's 200,000 parts per billion. Wheat has a maximum residue level of 30 parts per million. That's 30,000 parts per billion. Why is that? That's because of industry use. There's these super weeds that are growing in the cornfields, growing a resistance to glyphosate. So farmers are now taking 2 or 3 passes on the crop. The residue levels increase. So now you need to raise the level to 13 parts per million. And that's what Monsanto told the EPA back in 2013. And the EPA did that without any scientific evidence of showing that raising the maximum residue level is at all safe. So that entire system is fraudulent.
I mean, I look at this stuff as a weapon of mass destruction. It is, and not just destroying human lives, but destroying the microbiome of the soil, destroying everything that it touches, the water supply, etc. I mean, this is a massively weaponized thing that is sold for profit, and I still, for life me, can't imagine how it's okay to still keep using it after all the information's come out, the court cases have come out, and I'm hoping that this new movement, that MAHA, is going to have an impact on suddenly getting the regs right and getting rid of things that are toxic and getting rid of the bad actors who've been lying about it for years for the purpose of profit.
The action step is we have to try to avoid these by eating cleaner foods the best we can. The first choice would be eat 100% organic, right? That's not going to happen perhaps all the time. Sometimes you end up out at places that doesn't have organic, and sometimes even in your home. Some of the organic foods you don't have access to, or they're very expensive. So then if you Google the Clean 15, those are basically the 15 foods that use less chemical and are dramatically lower levels of those chemicals. Or avoid the dirty dozen. Those are the 12 foods that have the highest levels of these chemicals. I think it's step one of avoiding these. So yeah, you can wash with some different vegetable sprays, but the fact is a lot of it is absorbed into the food itself. But I think the first thing we need to do for our families is avoidance.
What makes for America's record output? It's not only her natural resources, its mass production, constant modernization of plants, and the search for new techniques.
After World War II, we have something called literally the chemical revolution, where companies started figuring out that they can manufacture chemicals and make foods cheaper. They can make all kinds of things like plastics, and this industry boomed to where we became the chemical leader of the whole world. And those chemicals were found in everything that we're exposed to.
Microplastics are in almost everything. When you drink out of a plastic water bottle, there's significant shedding of the plastic into the water. The inner lining of all cans, including soda cans. Most people don't realize that aluminum cans are all lined with plastic. Every single one. Most cardboard packages, like the Tetra packaging where you can get the shelf-stable liquids, those are also lined with plastic. And recent research has shown that we are consuming upwards of a credit card worth of plastic a week between all of these different things.
One of the new studies are finding plastic in every organ, cell, tissue in the body. Plastic is through our food supply, cosmetic supply, things that we're drinking out of. This plastic water bottle right here, 240,000 micrograms of plastic that turn into nanoparticles of plastic that are ending up in our tissues. Plastic is causing this massive hormone disruption. It blocks hormone receptors, it damages hormone receptors. Plastics mimic estrogen in your body. You can have low levels of real estrogen and your body thinks it's high levels, which interferes with the feedback loop, and we know it drives cancer. If you really know how much these bottles are doing, you're gonna give your kids a different bottle to take to school. Here they have many water bottles now from metal and different glass, porcelain, that we don't have to drink from plastic. So do we need to avoid plastic? Yes. There is hope at the end of the day, but our job is to minimize these massive sources. Not completely, but do the best job we can as a family. And that starts with